Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and in this video I'd like to share with you a time lapse that was taken from 9 recorded live lessons in which we draw this interesting lizard man with pen and ink. Now, this complete lesson series is available to members at thevirtualinstructor.com. It is presented in real time with drawing instruction, of course. Our membership program includes a broad variety of drawing and painting courses on a broad variety of drawing and painting media and subjects, weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute, and a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers. If you want to learn more about our membership program, I'll leave a link in the description below. You can go check it out. Now, in just a moment, we'll get to that time lapse, and I'll sprinkle in a little bit of drawing instruction as well. But if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't done so yet, why not subscribe to the channel? We cover a broad variety of drawing and painting media and subject matter here. And make sure you click on that notification bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. If you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do so. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can go check those out. All right, now without further ado, let's have a look at the time lapse. Now, we worked from a photo reference to complete this drawing, but of course it was a little bit difficult to find a lizard man for a model, or at least one who is willing to sit for me. So I had to create a composite image using a couple of images, and I created this composite image in Photoshop. We'll take a quick look at that first, and then we'll take a quick look at the materials, then we'll get into the drawing. So the first thing we're looking at here is a big old iguana, and what I did here is I wanted to do something that was an animal that had some interesting texture associated with it. So I started my search looking for reptiles, and I came across several reptiles. And I'm just sharing with you the way I arrived at the reference that we're working with in my mind. So, but I didn't want to just do another derivative drawing, because we've done, that's mostly what we do around here is pretty much derivative drawings. And of course we incorporate a little bit of style, and maybe we might push the color scheme and so on, and play around the composition and other things like that. But I wanted to push the boundaries a little bit for this series. So I didn't want to just use another image and, just slightly modify it and do a derivative drawing. But I did want to incorporate something that had some interesting texture, like this iguana, and this iguana stood out to me. There was also a couple of other images of crocodiles and alligators and stuff that I thought looked pretty cool. And I thought, how could I create somehow a picture in a picture? How could I make this iguana look like it's incorporated in another image? I actually started thinking about crocodiles first and how I could stack crocodiles and make them look like a mountain range. But that probably would have just translated as just a bunch of crocodiles.
A pile of crocodiles.
So I started thinking a little bit deeper, and I felt, maybe it'd be interesting if this was kind of like a lizard man. Mm-hmm. How could I make him a lizard man? So I did some more searching, and I found this image of this guy right here. And these images are from Pixabay. So basically what I did is I took the head of the iguana, and I took the body of the man, and then combined them together in this image. And when I did so, I also cropped the image down, eradicating a lot of the information up here at the top. You can see that I also flipped the iguana's head. He was looking this way, and now he's looking that way. I did some alterations to the value too, so that it made sense with the light source that's coming in from the right corner here. You can see the light source is coming from the right. And this, of course, is creating shadows over here, and the light is hitting the iguana and the man in a way that looks pretty convincing in this particular image. I also had to use a lot of the Photoshop tools to do some distorting. So I made the shoulders of the man a lot broader, and so that the opening of the shirt would fit with the iguana's head. And of course, I cut the head out and did some transformations there to the head as well, to make the head feel like it was coming out of the top of the tuxedo shirt there. And I also created a little bit of a cast shadow right here behind the iguana on the wall, because we can see that cast shadow there on the couch, which is created from the body. And it wouldn't make sense to have a shadow for the body and not a shadow for the head. You can see that shadow for the man kind of went up and just followed the edge there, but I added this shadow here for the iguana's head. And basically the way I did that is I just filled in a shape of the iguana's head, transformed it and flattened it a little bit, and then used the Gaussian blur and also the transparency to make it look natural in the background, and also took that shadow and put it behind the lizard's head in a different layer. All of this stuff we cover in the course Basic Photoshop for Artists. We talk about how to do these things, how you can bring in stuff from, you can combine two images together. In that particular course, we combined two images to make it look like a completely natural image, like it was photographed. This is not a natural photograph, obviously, but it should make for an interesting drawing. It tells a little bit of a story, and I love all the challenging textures that are in here as well. The paper that we're going to be using here is Bristol Smooth, and I'm working on a 9x12 sheet of paper, and like I said before, I've already got a grid prepared on another sheet of paper, on another board actually, that's 8 inches by 9 inches. Micron pen is a 003 pen. This is super small. In fact, it's a 0.15 millimeter line. So we're going to get super tiny marks with this pen. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself by talking about this, but the Staedtler pens are going to make a similar mark, similar width mark, and this is a 0.05 pigment liner. So all of these are the 0.05 liners, and this is a 003.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the drawing process. And as you can see, I used the grid technique here. Of course, accuracy was important, and we had a wonderful composite image to work from. I decided to start with the head of the iguana here because clearly that is going to be the focal point, and a lot of times I like to start drawing with the area of the composition that's going to be the focal point. We tend to put a little bit more attention in the area that we begin a drawing, so that's always a good idea to start the drawing process in the focal point. Once I had the drawing drawn out using a 2H graphite pencil, it was time to start making pen and ink applications. I started here with the Micron pen, the 003 pen, and I started with the eye of the lizard man here. Again, within the focal point, we're going to be drawn to the eye, so obviously that makes sense to start there. Now, there are a variety of textures that happen here on the lizard's head, and you can tackle these textures any way that you wish, but with pen and ink, I like to use a combination of developing the pattern or developing the texture with one pass, and then develop the value with a second pass. So you'll see that I'm creating somewhat of a repetition of the pattern of the texture, and then I'm going back over the top of it with some directional hatching to create the shadowed areas. Now, early in the drawing process, you want to be careful that you don't get too dark too quickly, especially when you're working with pen and ink. In this image, we needed to have some contrast between the head of the lizard and the background so that we didn't lose the lizard head. So the way that we applied the pen and ink, of course, was especially important. We were trying to be careful, or I was trying to be careful not to get too dark with my applications, which is really easy to do. So it's always better to start with somewhat of a lighter value that you can always go back and make a little bit darker if you need to. It's almost impossible to make a darker area lighter, however, if you accidentally go too dark. So you can see here the lighter side of the lizard was addressed mainly with small little dots, small little circles, and the darker side, of course, we had more of a concentration of those marks and also some hatching marks over the top to create those shadowed areas. Once we had the head in place, it was time to move on down to the body here. I started with the white of the shirt. Again, even in this area where it's white, and I put that in quotations, we still see a variety of different values here, so we do still need to apply some hatching. Now you'll notice in that area of the shirt, we use directional strokes to not only develop the value, but also to give an indication of the form. So we can get an indication of the wrinkles that happen there due to the directional strokes that we make with the pen and ink. And this carried over, of course, into the jacket. We just have more of a concentration of marks there. So as the folds happened in the jacket and the curves happened there, the directional strokes that I made also needed the curve in the same way. So as I was developing the value, I was also helping to create the illusion of form. These types of lines are often referred to as cross contour lines, and it can be somewhat of a difficult concept for beginners to grasp, but when you see it in action right here, it's really easy to understand. Now, clearly, cross contour lines is an important concept because it helps us make decisions on which direction we should make our strokes with our medium. In this case, it's very clear with the pen and ink, but these strokes could also be made with with graphite, or they could be brush strokes applied with acrylics or oils. So as you can see here, I moved down to the hand, and the hand is lighter in value, but there's still some shadows there, so we continued with the hatching. And of course, the process of adding these cross contour lines and developing the form and the value continued down on the pant leg as well, leaving open areas for the highlights. Of course, the highlights are just as important as the shadows, and it can be real tempting to fill in some of those areas with pen and ink a little bit too quickly, but we want to preserve those highlights, of course, as we go through the process. Now, there's even some areas, or clearly there are some areas in this drawing that appear black, but you'll notice that I'm not filling in these areas completely with a solid application. I'm allowing some of the little specks of the white of the paper to show through, of course, and this is going to ensure harmony and unity in the drawing so that the application technique that we're using is consistent throughout the drawing. I think a lot of beginners are tempted to grab a Sharpie marker or just fill in those areas with a solid application, but it's really helpful to make sure that the application technique that you use is consistent throughout the drawing, and leaving little bits of the paper showing through helps to convey that, and of course that leads to harmony and unity. You'll also notice that the technique I like to use with pen and ink is I like to start by outlining the contour lines, and sometimes I'll use a broken line to outline some of the edges of objects, and then I go in and start filling in some of the textures and the values, of course. Now, another important concept to keep in mind when you're working with pen and ink is that you have to simplify some objects sometimes. You have to sometimes interpret textures and try to make them work for your drawing so that you're communicating that texture to your viewer, but you're not overworking the drawing or getting too much ink on the surface. And we can see this here in the texture of the chair or the couch that the lizard man is sitting on. You can see that the pattern that I created there is not quite as tight as the pattern that's observed in the reference. That would just require too much ink on the surface, and of course it would make the entire drawing a little bit too dark. You can see that concept of cross contour lines continues down on the leg of the chair, and then over to the lamp we moved, and here again we started with the contour lines, the outlines, and then it was a process of developing the value and also the illusion of form using cross contour lines. You can see I'm changing the direction of the stroke when I get to another section on the lamp, and that's because the values are similar in these locations, and we can create contrast by changing the directional stroke in those locations. So we can create contrast in other ways, not just by value or color, of course, but we can change the direction of the stroke, and that creates contrast as well. There are a few subtle shadows on the lamp itself, so again we were addressing that with some lines that were spaced out, and then the chair rail and the molding there, of course, was addressed with directional strokes that contrasted the directional strokes on the lamp. So you can see this is a tedious process. This entire drawing took probably about 11 hours. It was spaced out over 9 one-hour-long lessons, but there was some homework in between. Some of the textures on the wall you can see behind the lizard, that was very time-consuming, of course. But it's just basically a pattern to create value in a little bit of texture that's going to contrast the textures around it. The process of developing the hatching and the shadow continued down on the legs of the chair, of course. Now, when we got down to the floor, in the photo reference, you can see how dark it is, but I decided to simplify it here by just creating some lines that mimicked the lines that you might see in the texture of a wood grain. And then, of course, directional strokes over the top, some hatching there to create the cast shadows, which reflect the light source coming from the upper right-hand corner. I simplified the rug here, so I didn't put as many details as were observed in the photo reference in the rug. I wanted to leave some light spaces down here so that the drawing didn't become too visually heavy at the bottom, of course. And then, of course, we needed to think about the images that were on the wall behind the bug. So I decided, or behind the lizard. So I decided to put a few bugs back there. You know, we as humans like to put pictures of food on the wall sometimes. So why not the lizard man having some pictures of some food back there as well? So grabbed a few reference images from Pixabay here, and then incorporated those into the picture frame behind the lizard man, just to give a little bit more story to the drawing and make it a little bit more interesting. I needed to be careful here that I didn't create too many darker values around the head of the lizard. Of course, we were trying to preserve the head of the lizard, which of course was the focal point. We didn't want to lose that in a sea of darker values. And then our drawing was complete. Of course, it took a while to complete this, but I was pretty pleased with the end result.
Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to pick up a couple of things here and there. Remember, if you're new to the channel or haven't done so yet, subscribe and click on that notification bell. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you like it so that other people can find this video, of course. If you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, there's a link in the description below. And there's also a link to our membership program in the description below this video, of course. Thanks again for watching. And as always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.